We're going to recognize, for example, that if you're 25 in America, chances are you're not going to get Social Security at 65. It's not about politics, it's about math. 50 years ago, we had 8 workers for every 1 retiree. Today, we have 2 workers for every retiree. With a growing population, you know when 65 was set as the retirement age? It was set by Bismarck when he was premier of Germany back in the 1870s, and the reason he set 65 was because life expectancy was 55. Now we can do this in a way that says, you know, whether we grandfather people in at 50 or 55 and raise it 1 month a year for dozens of years, America can deal with this. And we can make Social Security solvent. If we're going to take on the question of our deficit, we're also going to have to confront healthcare costs. Our federal deficit is not being driven by our education spending, or our transportation spending, or the one-off programs you read about. Our federal deficit is being driven by Medicaid, Medicare, and Veterans Health Care. And until we can drive down our health care costs, and let me say, you know, the health care bill that was passed does not do near enough to take on cost containment. Because these are going to be hard questions. These are going to ask us uncomfortable kind of questions that we've not had to grapple with as a country. But in the past, America has always been willing to step up. And I think there again, that's going to be the challenge of our day. And I can report that not everything you read in the newspaper or on TV, where everybody is feuding and fighting, is always the case. I've started an effort, actually, with a Republican senator, because none of this is going to happen unless it's bipartisan. With Senator Saxby Chambliss from Georgia, where we're simply trying to educate the members of the Senate to the parameters of the problem around the deficit. And frankly, just as we did back in 2004, when we had to make cuts, but then confront Virginia's budget crisis at that point, and you all were enormous allies in that conversation we have with the people of Virginia. I think we're going to need that same kind of conversation with folks around the country. And my final closing comment would be this, is that, you know, if we're going to get it right, and I believe so fervently that neither political party has all the answers, it is going to take a real sense of those willing to find common ground. My advice and plea to you is, if you watch Fox News, once a week turn on MSNBC. If you watch MSNBC, once a week turn on Fox. Realize that neither side has got all the answers. Realize that those folks who come into politics with views that broke no compromise are not going to be the people that actually get stuff done. You live that every day. Regardless of your partisan affiliation, you have to make things work at the local level for the people of your communities and your counties. We should expect nothing less than the same people you hire in the General Assembly and in the United States Congress and the United States Senate. And I hope in some small way that I can be part of that crowd that's not just throwing bombs, but I'm actually starting thinking about forming a new caucus in the United States Senate. You know, they all got these caucus. I'm going to form the bipartisan Let's Get Stuff Done caucus. Yeah. Thank you all very much. We have to take your questions.
Senator, other than those that came on September 14 of 1958, I see a great deal of problems in our communities with immigration. And I don't know when is it that our federal government is going to address this issue that continues to get worse and worse for us to deal with at the local level. And making it harder to get a driver's license at the state level and those kind of, you know, issues does not solve our problem. When do you see our federal government really addressing this issue and bring some common sense to the fact that if we're not going to send all those folks back, and I appreciate that we're going to include all of them, that you find some kind of a practical solution that we can deal with. It's young folks that are graduating from high school and can't go to college, they can't get a job because they don't have the ability to transport themselves and move themselves around. And we just cannot continue that. In some areas like ours, there's a lot of industry and a lot of jobs out there, you know, the wrong move, and it can have a great impact in our county. I just hope that the federal government soon looks at it.
We've had this conversation before. We also ought to recognize, you know, and I say this now more from my friends from Northern Virginia will validate this. You know, Lieutenant Governor Bowling mentioned the fact that Northern Virginia's technology, Northern Virginia's economy is the engine in Virginia, and a lot of that comes from the technology community. Well, I got to tell you folks, 25 to 30% of all the technology companies in Northern Virginia are founded by first new Americans. People who came here from somewhere else and decided to build their companies here, and we all have benefited from that. Now, I also think we are a nation of laws, and the current system we have is a disgrace. And particularly for those people who are trying to wait in line in a normal process to get through immigration, when we then simply have a porous border that allows people to basically cut the line and cheat. And so I do support stronger border security. But at the end of the day, and again, this will probably make most everybody mad in today's audience, but we will never solve the immigration problem in this country until we're willing to thoughtfully think about national identity information that has biometrics on it. Now that's scary. And if it's done wrong, it's scary. But until you can find a way, but it's coming. Healthcare IT is moving us to I got a daughter with juvenile diabetes. I want her to carry her personal medical records on her person in a privacy-protected way. We're talking about how people are moved the driver's license. I'm not sure the driver's license should be that national identity information. But until an employer can do with a credit card swipe and determine whether this person is legal or not in a way that then cuts off the source of the reason for people who are coming, jobs, we're never going to solve this problem. We can build giant fences, but if you're making $1 a day in Mexico and $10 an hour in Chesterfield County, people are going to find a way here. So we have to think about this in a way to cut off the job source, and the only way you cut off the job source is by having a documentation system that works. I've been to some of the facilities, poultry facilities in particular, some that actually the state supported, in the valley. And I've asked, well, how many people are documented? Well, we've got documentation from 85%. We all know the documentation is mostly phony. So until we can think thoughtfully as a country about, and let me say, folks, if we're going to have this, you and I are going to carry this card too. We're not going to have a society where we say, you might look like you're an immigrant, so you're the only one that can carry it. We're going to need to think thoughtfully about how, on a way that can't be tampered, that's privacy protected, national identity. Other countries around the world, the United Kingdom's doing it, other countries in Asia are doing it, and this is scary if we do it wrong. But until we're willing to have at least that kind of conversation, I think mostly what you're going to hear about immigration instead is just rhetoric. And just both sides whipping up a frenzy. And that doesn't get us anywhere. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for joining us, Senator Warner. I'm Barbara Favola.
I know who you are, Barbara.
You know who I am. Well, you may not know that I'm now the first Vice President of BACA, but I'm glad you're here. And for the audience, I'm from Arlington County. My question to you is if Congress is going to take on a long-term plan for job growth in the country, I would argue that we really need to invest in human capital. I think there's much more need for a federal role, both in funding preschool, K-12 education, in higher ed, and in job retraining. Ultimately, it's going to be our people who will get us out of this recession. I'd like you to comment on that, please.
Well, Barbara, I think I don't disagree that our value add in the world economy is going to be a smarter workforce. It's not going to be the cheapest wages. There's always going to be somebody that's going to be willing to do it cheaper. And I think one of our best long-term investments is in human capital. But one of the things I differ again from the administration is that, we've gone through a really rough patch. Everybody else has tightened their belt. Local government has, state government